Hello, everybody, and welcome to Taking Control, the ADHD podcast on Rash Pixel FM. I'm Pete Wright, and right there is Nikki Kinzer.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Pete.
You know who's a real showman? That's Zac Efron.
Really?
My son made me watch High
the
School
greatest
Musical.
Oh, I thought you were going to say The Greatest Showman,
no.
but that wasn't.
I'm all over The Greatest Showman. We are already fans, but my son is at that age where High School Musical, it's like manufactured for kids my son's age.
Yes.
And so they're all singing the songs at school. Now that thing is, it is like manufactured by machine learning. I've been singing though Zac Efron songs. He was 7 in that show?
Was he 17, really?
Whatever. I don't know. I'm making that up.
I've never seen it, so I don't know.
He was a scrawny little kid, not that hunk specimen that he is today. He was already an incredible standout showman. That's why I hope one day somebody says that Pete Wright, he's the Zac Efron of podcasting.
Oh, I'm sure that they're saying that right now.
Right.
As they're listening, they're like, there's no, that's Zac Efron right there.
Yeah.
I'm listening to him.
That's Zac Efron. God, he shaves that beard. He takes off about 40 years. He could be in High School Musical. Look, we're talking about, we're continuing our ADHD at Work series today. We're talking about something that I know plagues those in our community. So we're going to talk about it. Accommodations, getting the accommodations you need and deserve at work. And it is a muddy, horrible mess.
It really is.
It's just, if you're having a hard time getting those accommodations, you are not alone.
No, you're not.
Yeah.
You're not. It's so different than
bad.
Like in college, right? Because I work a lot with college students too, and it's different, getting accommodations at work versus getting them in the academic world. So, yes, we have a lot to talk about.
Protections are very different.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're going to talk all about that. First, head over to Take Control ADHD to get to know us a little bit better. You can listen to the show right there on the website or subscribe to the mailing list, and we'll send you an email each time a new episode is released. You can connect with us on Twitter or Facebook at Take Control ADHD. And we have this community, this online community through Discord and Facebook, the ADHD group. It's an incredible place. We learn about goat yoga and babies being born and celebrate each other's birthdays. And it's all done online through this incredible community of listeners and supporters of this show at patreon.com/the ADHD podcast. Patreon, if you've never heard of it, it is a model where it's like National Public Radio. You give a few dollars and that money goes into a bucket that helps pay salaries, put food on the table for the people who are doing the reporting and the management of the service every single month. That's just what Patreon does for us. So we have a few extra things. You get to attend the live recordings of our show. You get some extra workshops that you get every month at the Supreme level. But mostly you get our deep love and gratitude for your participation in this community. We couldn't do it without you. And so to those who have already supported via Patreon, thank you for being a continuing member. For those who have considered it or never given before, please give it a shot. First and foremost, make smart financial decisions. Second, we appreciate you helping to support and grow the ADHD podcast. Again, patreon.com/the ADHD podcast. We appreciate you. Okay, we've got a little bit of news.
We have a couple of announcements, and the first one that I want to talk about is the Hearts for ADHD. And this is something that a friend of mine who's also an ADHD coach, who I get to meet up with every year at the CHAD conference, and it's lovely. And she's actually been on our show too. Jennifer Camp, a couple of years ago, actually came on the show and talked to us about Hearts for ADHD. And she is running this campaign again. I know we're kind of late in actually talking about it on the podcast because it's something that's running February 1st through the 14th. However, I don't think we can put a deadline on it. I think that you should always encourage your children to see their strengths. And that's what this campaign is all about, is she has these little hearts that you can get from her website. And what you do is you put every day for her campaign, it's every day, February 1st through the 14th, something great about your child, a strength that he or she has. And so one of the things that she had for her son was a sense of humor. She loves his sense of humor. And so anyway, again, I know we're a little late on advertising this on the podcast, but I think it's something great to do any time of the year and really encourage you to check that out.
You know whose mother did that for him when he was a young guy?
You.
Zac Efron.
Oh, Zac Efron. Well,
I'm
of course,
saying,
because look how great
at him
he is.
now. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
You have a man crush. That's
Zac
what I'm
Efron,
getting.
Dax Shepard.
Yeah.
Probably a little Will Arnett. No, I got a list.
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
totally.
Yeah.
Tom Cruise. Oh, please.
Oh,
Hugh Jackman.
No.
Please.
I don't
need
like
to go?
Tom Cruise.
All right.
No.
What?
Oh, I do not like him.
He runs like a freight train, Nikki Kinzer.
After I watched the documentary on Scientology, no, thank you.
I know. It's okay. All right.
Yeah.
Moving on.
Okay,
We have
moving
other
on, because
news.
that's going into a whole different area. Yes. And then the second announcement I have for us to share is the Women's ADHD Palooza, which is coming in the end of February. And that is hosted by Linda Rogley, one of our good friends on the show as well. And it is a great opportunity to listen to many different ADHD experts around a lot of different topics. Last week, I said that we were going to be in this Palooza. Unfortunately, it didn't work out with our schedules. So we are not part of the Palooza, but I highly recommend that you still sign up, check it out, and if you want, send a little note to Linda about how you miss us. That would be great.
That would be the best. You know what? That is action item number 2. 1, hearts in your kid's lunchbox. 2, send Linda a note. Tell her how much you miss Nikki and Pete on the show.
And it wasn't her fault either. So I just want to make sure, it's not any hate mail.
Yeah, right.
Because Linda's fantastic. It was just a scheduling situation. So anyway, those are the 2 biggest announcements I have for the month of February.
Excellent. Then we should talk about accommodations.
We shall.
Yes. Circus music, because accommodations are fun.
Oh, they are. They're so tough, especially when you get into the workforce. So I thought a good place for us to start is to just briefly say an explanation of what Americans with the Disabilities Act is. Basically, it states that employers are required by law to provide reasonable accommodations for otherwise qualified employees and applicants unless these accommodations pose an undue hardship. Let me just repeat that.
Dumb.
I know. I'm going to repeat it.
Mm-hmm.
Americans with Disabilities Act states that employers are required by law to provide reasonable accommodations for otherwise qualified employees and applicants unless these accommodations pose an undue hardship. It is such a loaded sentence, and it can be taken in so many different ways.
And the problem is it's taken in so many different ways, usually by the employers and the legal community defending employers.
Right,
and
right.
that is what makes it really hard.
Right. Well, and they've got the money to do it, right? I mean, they've got the money and the resources to be able to do that versus one person who is, on their own.
Right.
So, yes.
So there is a good thing about the Americans with Disabilities Act, that it exists, right? It exists, and it protects a ton of people. And occasionally, it provides a framework for how to talk about accommodations in the workplace that can really help a lot of people be more productive and live up to their experience, no
Absolutely.
matter what they're living with in terms of their physical, emotional, psychological abilities. So it's really, I want to say up front, it is a good that it exists. And hidden in it is this namby-pamby, undue hardship language. For us, that is, it is just
confusing.
Confusing.
It's really
confusing. It
right.
does nobody any good.
Right. Yeah. It really is. Because, who's deciding if the accommodations are reasonable? The employer. What's considered undue hardship? Is there a money value to that?
That's usually what it is.
Right.
It's usually a fiscal condition.
But that's the thing that's really kind of strange. If you're asking for the accommodation of coming into work at 10 a.m. instead of 8 a.m. and working 10 to 7 instead of 8 to 5, is that an undue hardship? You can't really put
Well,
money to that.
and I have heard this response. We cannot do that because, and I heard this specifically in the state of Arizona, the town of Phoenix. We will not be working any sort of swing schedule, right, where you're working off hours of the general population because of our environmental control systems. If some people come in at 8 and work 8 to 5, and some people work 10 to 7, and some people will undoubtedly want to work noon to 8 or 9, then we will have to run the air conditioning at a higher rate for longer during the day, and that is an expense that is considered an undue hardship.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah. So like like we think about undue hardships like, we live in an old building that's a historic building and we can't do any sort of physical conversion of that building in order to make it ADA accessible, like to put ramps on it, for example, to make it, we can't touch it because it's a historic building. Well, that is where the ADA runs headlong into, community civic challenges, and that gets worked out in courts, right? That's
right.
kind of it. But not wanting to run the air conditioner because it'll cost you hundreds extra a month, so that your employees can get what they that is where the undue hardship language gets frustrating for a lot of people.
Oh, that's too bad. I don't even have anything to say about that.
I know. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I just wanted to set that up
because I'm glad you bring that up because that makes sense. Because I'm just thinking, it's 2 hours. What difference does it make? But I guess in that realm it can. But
well, and sometimes an undue hardship is not just the hours, but it's the fact that many employers will feel like if they make an accommodation for one or a small group,
right,
that accommodation is extended to everybody who wants it, whether or not they need it. And
no, that's I can see that. And there are going to be people who will take advantage of that.
Yeah. Well, and take advantage of what? Working a schedule. So
I know,
there are conditions about the work. Like this is just it's just frustrating traditional leadership model, and
it really is, and that's really
thinking.
what it comes down to is this traditional work model that isn't really necessary if you're not working with the public, if you're not working with customers who are coming in and seeing you, and you're just doing admin work or work, on a computer. It's really frustrating.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. When I was looking at my notes about this,
I snuck some things in.
You did sneak some things in, and I'm really glad that you did because this is a really complicated, situation. And one of your questions here was, who decides if your ADHD is a disability? Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
I do because this is what makes it incredibly difficult. Because so many, and this is the number one question we get is, when and how and if I should tell my employer about my ADHD,
right,
and how I live with ADHD, and would it be useful to have that discussion? Well, great. And that's followed by a grand so what in the eyes of the ADA, because who decides if your ADHD is an actual disability, even if you have a diagnosis, even if you've gone through the rigmarole of being tested and having an evaluation that comes out and says, check, this person lives with ADHD. If your physician or psychologist does not add these are the symptoms that specifically are severe enough that will or that are considered disabling at work. That is the language. It has to be disabling at work. Then it is not something that is considered protected under ADA, right? You have to have your diagnosis and you have to have an addendum that says this is severe enough to be debilitating at work and it should be protected under ADA. And then if you are not willing to tell your employer, if you're not willing to share all of this information with them in an official capacity, you have zero protections under ADA, right? You can't just go in and say, I have ADHD, I have a diagnosis, and I need to work a swing shift.
Mm-hmm.
You have to go through all of these protections. And even then, you may not be protected. Your employer may not qualify under protections of ADA at all
Right.
if they are, because there are state and
Federal.
national
Yeah.
limits, right? The federal limit is if your employer is more than 15 employees, then they are protected under ADA. Some states will go as low as 4. I think Pennsylvania, don't quote me on that, but there are different state regulations that go as low as 4 that says, if you're a team of any group of people, more than 3, you should be protected under ADA. But that would be a state thing that is dependent on where you live. The federal limit right now is 15.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So
that's interesting too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, I feel like just knowing that, what ADA is and isn't, and what it does propose to protect and what it doesn't,
Right.
and what you have to do if you want to use ADA as a defense, I think that sets the stage for the rest of this.
Well, and that is also why I mentioned earlier, it's so different between the academic world and the work world. Because the academic world, I think, is a little bit more, at least from my experience with working with college students that I have, not all professors necessarily aren't always helpful, but a lot of them are, and a lot of the student services are wonderful, and they really do help these students and make a big difference. It's just a very different world when you get into the work world.
Well, and the difference in the academic world is you have an advocate in student services, right?
Yes.
If you go through the channels to get your diagnosis and be officially protected, by the school, you have an advocate in student service, disability services, that you don't have to talk to your teacher. They do all the work, right? That's technically the way it's supposed to work, is you have an advocate at the school that manages all of that relationship for you so that you can just get your work done. Again, I know I'm speaking sort of grandly, idealistically, generally, broadly. I know your mileage may vary,
yes,
but
absolutely.
That's the letter, if not, or I should say that's the letter and the intent of the law, and that's not the way it necessarily plays out.
And where they're the same is if a student with ADHD has these accommodations, but they still fail a class, they still fail the class.
Yes.
So they don't pass.
You can still get fired.
You can still get fired and get kicked out of a university because of academic probation, and you didn't make that 2.0. So it is, and that's where we go into with the company, is that technically they're not supposed to discriminate against you because you have ADHD. However, just because you have ADHD doesn't mean your job is safe. And that's what you're saying here, is that you can still be fired from a job and not be covered by the ADA. So we don't want to make this ADA be a security blanket and thinking that you're untouchable, because unfortunately you aren't. Well, and the thing is too, is that we have to think about what's happening with the employee. I mean, if a company is firing you because you've been late to work too many times and have made too many mistakes, it's tricky, because the ADHD could have been, and probably is, the reason this is happening and getting in your way, because for whatever reason it's not managed, or it's out of, you aren't able to get out of the door on time. You don't have those systems in place. You don't know what the clear expectations are of the job. I mean, there could be so many different reasons of why this is happening. Right. But what they see is that you're not qualified for the job. And it's not directly because you have ADHD, but the ADHD got in the way. So then, what do I do with that? So it's just so tricky.
Yes.
And we're not lawyers.
No.
So definitely want to say, if you have questions about your exit from a job, whether you got let go and did you think you got let go unfairly, don't write Pete and I. Like, we aren't going to know.
We don't know
if that was the case or not.
Yeah.
But definitely do talk to a lawyer.
That leads us to, I guess, the first biggest question.
Do you tell or not tell?
Do you tell or don't you?
And I had this.
And do you tell or don't you in an interview? Do you tell or don't you once you get the job? How do you handle disclosing your ADHD?
It is such a personal decision, and every single person with ADHD is going to have a different story. Some people are going to say they told and it was the worst thing that they could have done. Some people are going to say they said something and it was the best thing that they could have done. And so that's the tricky part too, is that there isn't an answer for that. You and I, again, can't say you should or shouldn't. I think it really depends on your job and how long you've been there, what your relationship is with your coworkers, with your boss. Would I say something in an interview? No. My personal opinion is I wouldn't share that I have anxiety in an interview, right? Like, I'm not going to say, oh, I was diagnosed with generalized anxiety a few years ago and I take medication for that. Like, I wouldn't say that. So I think you have to protect yourself. And the ADHD is a part of you. And I guess I want to go back to, it isn't you. So do you have challenges? Everybody has challenges. You don't need to highlight what those are in an interview. Talk about your strengths. Talk about what you're good at. And so I would probably say, in an interview, I don't know.
Well, that's what an interview is for, right? Is manage to your strengths.
Right, right. Or is this a good fit for you? And again, it goes back to what we talked about last week. You need to interview them just as much as they're interviewing you.
100%. I'm really glad you said that. That's what I was going to say too. It's this idea that, like, if you know that your ADHD is going to impact you negatively, you're going to know in that interview, right? Because you're talking to them about what the job is, what the expectations are, and you may have to make the hard and honest decision yourself to say this is not going to be a good fit because of the symptoms of my ADHD, right? I own that. It's okay. It's okay to say this is going to be a terrible fit. I'm not going to be able to communicate with you as my manager. You don't say that out loud. Please don't say that out loud. But you say in your head voice, I can't communicate with this person who's talking to me. I know that I'm going to be, living in a disaster straits if I try to take this on. It will be too much because it just doesn't agree with the symptoms of my ADHD. It's okay to be honest with yourself, right?
Absolutely.
That is,
yes.
Do that.
And you can ask for accommodations without saying why you need them, and I think that we talked about this a while back when we were having the same discussion. You can tell an employer that, gosh, I work better if I'm not in a room full of cubicles. If I have to be in a room full of cubicles, is there any way that I could be in like the far corner? Or is there another room that I could maybe use every once in a while if I need to focus on something? So, and you don't have to say it's because I have ADHD. You can ask for these things. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. But I just want to kind of plant the seed that you can ask for stuff and not necessarily say why.
Yeah. And that should be part of your interview process in the first place. Where am I going to sit? Like, what does the work environment look like?
Right.
Can I see it?
Yes.
Like, if there's a chance I get this job, can I see the kind of place I'll be sitting?
It's a great idea,
because
Pete.
that might actually impact you making your own decision about whether you say yes to this job if you were to get it. You want to put yourself in a position to have all that information.
If you are going to talk to somebody about your ADHD, in HR or your supervisor, we want to do it in a positive way. But what are some of the things that you can ask for? And this is something that was definitely harder to find in my research than it is in the academic world. Because in the academic world, it's pretty clear cut. Like, here are the bullet points of the things you can ask for. And there's always extra you can ask for if you have a good relationship with your professor. In the work environment, not so much. It's really gray trying to figure out what to ask for. But definitely, I think it's one of those things that you have to kind of know what to ask for because an employer is not going to know. And so think about what you're struggling with. Think about, what kind of accommodation would help me in this situation? What would that solution be? So that when you do go have that conversation, you have some ideas to bounce off with them about, and you're clear. You don't want to go into that conversation, thinking, I don't know. What do you think? Because they're not going to know. They're not.
The more specific you can be about your request, the better.
Much better.
The more specific, the better the plan, the better your understanding of resources of the office. I know we have this back room here and it's not being used for any anything in these hours. Would it be possible for me to move some of my job to that room from the hours of 11 to 2? Something
Right.
like that, right? So you can be very specific and proactive in getting what you want, all in the guise of, again, as you said, being positive in a way that I'm going to be more productive if I can XYZ. I'm going to do my job better if you'll okay me doing ABC.
Right. Absolutely. And that's exactly some of the things that you can ask for is doing some work in a less busy area. If you work in a noisy environment, ask if you can wear headphones to cancel out the noise. A lot of people do that. Maybe you need a stand up, sit down desk. Again, you're going to have to, tell them why and how that's going to help. It's a slippery slope, right, Pete? I mean, is that an undue hardship? I don't know. So
it's hard. And I think if you'll know pretty quickly if you're working in an environment that is, let's say, progressive in terms of how they handle things like ADHD, right? You'll know about your boss. You'll get a sense of that pretty quickly. I think my guidance here, if anything, is ask for things in terms of accommodations that don't cost money first.
Right.
Don't go in with, I need a new office. I need a new $1,000 piece of machine equipment. Right. First thing you do is see if you can solve the problem using the resources that they already have, that are change of behavior, not change in structure first. And if you can't get it done, but you're still doing a good job and you're doing your best and you're showing that you are showing up here, that you're part of the team, then you've got to build up some of that credibility.
Right.
And that's just a reality of employment, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's a very good point.
You're not paying your employer like you are a university, right? You're not.
It's different.
There's more willingness, I think, the university is going to protect you for a number of reasons, and one of them, unfortunately, is you're paying a bill to them.
Right.
And so you're not doing that at work. So how else are you paying a bill to your employer? You're doing your very best.
Right. Yes. That's a very good point. A couple of things that do not cause or actually would cost any money is asking for a weekly meeting, with your supervisor. Yeah. Can I meet with you once a week so we can go over goals and priorities for the week? If that's an issue and you're not really sure, this is an awesome opportunity to do that. Know your deadlines, know your expectations. If you're not sure, ask during that meeting what they are. Another thing that you might be able to do is record meetings. That can be really helpful. Especially if you're having issues with note taking and you want to be able to go back and hear what you may have missed, or you did kind of like doze off, you can come back and listen to it. And so, recording of meetings can be a big deal and can work out.
Always,
really well.
Always ask permission, please.
Oh, yeah.
Always ask permission
don't do that.
first. Don't just start doing it.
That could be bad. That's right.
God, it just happens. Even if you feel super confident that you know the laws and regulations of your state in terms of recording, please just let everybody know you're recording this for productivity purposes.
And that's
it. Personal record. And if anybody gives it, you ruin people's day by saying you're going to record something if they don't want to be recorded.
That's
and
right.
you don't want to ruin somebody else's day.
No, that's
then you
very
ruin your
true.
day. Because then you carry it around.
And carries it around. Yeah, it's awful.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is what I want to end with. You can make up your own accommodations that have nothing to do with your employer. These are the alarms and notifications that you might want to have in your calendar. Having a large wall calendar or whiteboard so that you can visually see what appointments are coming up. What do I need to do? Have a big, huge to-do list. I had a boss who had this huge whiteboard and had it broken up in different ways. And he had his to-do list and crossed it off when it was done or checked it off when it was almost done. I mean, there was just a lot of different ways you can do that. Use your planners. These are tools. And so, get your to-do list management system in place, your planners, your checklists, whatever helps with you. If there's a workflow chart that you want to create to kind of help you stay on track on, this is step 1, step 2, step 3, create those. I know it takes time up front, but it can definitely help you in the long run. Ask people to respond to you the way you need them to. If you're not an email person because the email is going to get lost, then maybe it's a text message. whatever that might be. Take your breaks, get outside, get a little exercise, get that heart pumping so that you can come back in and focus. These are the things that you can do that can help. Morning routines can help to get you out of the door on time and into work. So I would just say, look at the systems that you have, what's worked before, and get back into those routines and habits, and figure out where the struggle is, and then how do you get a solution for that struggle?
Can I just say anecdotally, you ask people how you want to correspond with them or how you want to be corresponded with is huge. You probably remember a couple of years ago, I made a big deal out of my voicemail that I was so bad at voicemail, like it would go months and I would not return calls. And I realized, oh my God, the problem is not that I don't respond to voicemail. It's that I don't tell anybody that I don't respond to voicemail. I'm just bad at it. It's okay. So now my voicemail says, I love you. Don't leave a message.
Right.
And
I love that. I think it's great.
So that has been, I think, in terms of how I run my own sort of individual business here, that has been probably the single best thing that I have ever done in terms of being able to stay in touch with people who are most important to me, because it reminds them, oh, all I have to do is text Pete, and I know I'll get a response in either minutes or hours, or I know it'll be in front of him at some point. And I think that has gone a long way to build trust. And that is what all of this is about, right?
Right.
Using the tools that you have at your disposal to build trust with your boss, your employer, your company, that you are doing your best. You're trying everything that you can to get the job done, to do, again, what ADA asked for, to satisfy the skill, experience, education, and other job-related requirements of the position sought or held. Are you doing your best to do that? When it gets in the way, then you get to push the domino, right? The first domino of I'm going to embark on the ADA protections, and so that's the flow diagram there.
There we are. That's our show on accommodations in the workplace.
Yeah, that is it. That is it. So that's what you get. And we have a couple more episodes coming up on more workplace stuff that are very exciting. And so keep coming back. Keep hanging out with us. We love you here. On behalf of Nikki Kinzer, I'm Pete Wright. We'll catch you next week right here on Taking Control, the ADHD podcast.